Welcome to the Legends Health, Wellness, and Performance podcast. Today I have Dr. Moskowitz, Michael Moskowitz, and he wrote the book Medical Cannabis. And I'm super excited to talk to him because he's considered one of the experts in the cannabis field. And he is a MD. He did a residency in psychiatric, and he's also, I believe, an anesthesiologist. Is that correct?
No, I'm a psychiatrist and a pain specialist, but not an anesthesiologist.
Okay. Somewhere I think I read that somewhere. So yeah, my mistake.
People say all kinds of things about you once you're out there, right? So, but I'm not an anesthesiologist.
Well, how did you get into the cannabis world? How did the pain specialty lead you into medical cannabis?
That's a very good question. So if I think about it, which I really haven't up until now, I think the reason it all happened was because I've been searching around for quite some time for treatment that worked better than the treatment that we have available to people with pain. I think the treatment that we have is helpful. People get better with it, but I didn't see people getting well. And it was bugging me. So I first invented an entire new treatment approach, which was it's called neuroplastic transformation, and it's about neuroplasticity and pain and how you can use your brain to control a lot of the pain that we think is beyond our ability to control, but it isn't. And how to use the brain in a very conscious, very directed fashion to counter-stimulate the pain signaling. So that was a huge amount of work. It took me 7-8 years to develop this thing. I have a partner I worked on this with, Dr. Marla Golden in Florida. And we read through 30,000 pages of literature and just started developing this new approach. It started with 2 pictures, and it ended up being about a 75-page full-color workbook with lots of text and lots of graphics to use and different kinds of techniques and approaches to a website that's that mirrors the workbook, but complements it and supplements it and makes it move and do all kinds of cool things. And so that was the first attempt to get at this. And I realized that this neuroplastic change is really essential if people are going to get well from a neuroplastically changed pain disorder, a chronic pain disorder. As I was doing that, one of the things that was interesting but missing from all this was a substance to actually treat people and create neuroplastic change, because our medicines tend to suppress the systems that they work in and replace them. And then it takes a while for those systems to come back. If people stop these medications, they get side effects from things that aren't specifically directed at what symptoms we're going after. And there can be problems with these things. And as I said, in pain medicine, we weren't doing all that well. We were helping, but we weren't curing. And I was kind of interested in seeing if we could cure some people of this stuff, including myself, because I had a chronic neck problem. And I used this technique on hundreds of patients, and we've taught this around the world. The book's sold all over the world. And we still have a lot of interest in it from a lot of people. And it's complex, and it's something that people really have to spend time with and work on. When I looked at cannabis, I thought, well, wait, this is not like our other medicines. This doesn't suppress the system it works in. It actually enhances that system. And then the system itself, the endocannabinoid system, appears to go out and work on at least 8 other systems than itself. And they were very basic systems in the body that involved everything from the extracellular matrix to the brain and everything in between. And so I thought, this is really an amazing substance. And I wanted to see if it would help with the patients, if it would be an advantage. And so I started, California had legalized this and let us start treating people with it quite a long time ago. I was resistant to doing it for a long time because it was cannabis, and I was prescribing medicines and blah blah blah. And I thought, this is ridiculous. This looks like a reasonable thing to try to do. The risks on it are very low. And why not try it and see what happens with our patients? And so I started introducing it to my patients as an idea. I talked with them about the endocannabinoid system. I talked with them about what the little bit I knew about the plant cannabinoids at that point. And people were interested. I actually can say it met with almost 100% interest. There were very few people that just didn't want to do it flat out because they didn't like the idea of cannabis. So once we started doing that, and I started working with patients, I started seeing amazing results, and I kept a database for about 1.5 years, a little bit longer, 19.3 months, where I followed the people I was treating with it to see how they responded to pain, stress, sleep, quality of life, energy, and focus. And if they were on opioid medications, did they lower their opioid medications? And I had amazing results. And this was over a long period of time. So even though it wasn't a randomized trial, I really got a lot of information out of all of it. And I would say I started probably 95% of the patients on the same regimen of high CBD, low THC tincture, same number of drops, same everything. And I would say of those 400 people, not one of them is on the same treatment as it evolved rapidly. They found their own treatment and what works. So it seems to be a treatment that's infinitely adjustable, and that people could really customize to what their needs were and how they felt about it. So that's a long answer to this question.
No, that's a great a great answer. I'm curious about one. I want to add there's a couple questions I want to ask you. One, I want to go back to, is neuroplasticity very similar to what you're doing? What's the difference between that and NLP? Neuro-linguistic. Yes, neurolinguistic.
There's similarities. There's some things that are the same, but this neuroplastic treatment to pain is much broader than that. We looked at every single way that we could find that the pain circuit is stimulated differently than pain in the brain. And so we looked first, we determined that the circuit was well researched and that it really involved on a conscious level of the brain, the amygdala, insula, prefrontal cortex, anterior cingulate cortex, posterior cingulate cortex, posterior parietal cortex, secondary somatosensory area, primary somatosensory area, and supplementary motor. In those areas, pain processing only accounts for about 5% of the cells in those areas. And when people developed chronic pain, that expanded to 25% of the cells that were processing pain. And to do that, that meant the other things that they were processing were being stolen for the pain process. So that was a basic concept that we brought to bear in all this stuff, and started with a simple graphic that showed where those areas are all lit up in pain and where they're not lit up when a person's not in pain. And we had people just stare at those pictures back and forth for a month.
Wow.
We'd look back and forth and say, if my brain looks like this, it can't be in pain. If my brain looks like this, it's in pain. And just kind of go back and forth for a week doing that. Then we had them put the pictures down and visualize them, and say, okay, this is what my brain looks like in their head in pain, and this is what it doesn't look like. And then we took it a next step, and we had them then just name the different areas like I just named to you, and visualize where those were, and saw the lights going out in each area. Just kind of visualize the lights going out in each area, and the pain brain turning into the non-pain brain. That was all I started with. And
That's fascinating.
To my great surprise, it worked. So that kind of led to a lot of research and a lot of other things. And now we have, as I said, we probably the book probably has about 180 very specific recommendations for techniques to use with treating pain, and the website probably has another couple of hundred, and they're together, they really are quite a body of work. So we're proud of that. But I was still missing a substance to treat people with, and that is really where cannabis has come in, and it's been amazing. It's just as robust as the basic research that we did, and we do think it's a neuroplastic treatment.
Okay, so when people start on cannabis, or let's even just say CBD, because did you start them out on cannabis, or did you just start them on CBD and isolate?
So here's the thing. In California, a cannabis dispensary cannot sell a hemp product. They have to be separate. And you can't sell hemp in any recreational cannabis place or medical cannabis stuff, even though it is cannabis. It's just cannabis with 0.3% or less THC. And so we couldn't really mix and match very well. And honestly, in California, the developed treatment availability was cannabis. So I always thought cannabis was the way to go. When I was into it for a while, I met a guy who is part of a research consortium we formed, who's got a research hemp farm licensed by the state here in the county where I live, in Marin County in Northern California. And he started, kind of showing some of the benefits of what hemp would be. So I've used that as well. I can recommend it. They just can't get it at the same place that they would get one or the other. So I've used both. And the isolates are really more of a new thing for us. We've had them available, but they've certainly developed, and they're very good for some reasons, and they're not very good for other reasons. And so you have to kind of figure out how you want to use them and where to use them strategically. So that's kind of been our way of going. And I've used every form of cannabis I can find, from the buds to suppositories. I mean, you name it, we've tried it.
Okay, so that's what I would like to talk about, that because there's full spectrum. Now there's water soluble, there's liposomal, there's specifically about CBD. I want to kind of focus specifically before we get into marijuana. What's your opinion on the different varieties that are out there? Because it is, like in your book, you state that it's lipophilic.
It is. So cannabis, all the cannabinoids are lipophilic. And that's fine once they get through your innards and your blood vessels and into your tissue. We want it to be lipophilic. So you wouldn't want to create a water-soluble cannabinoid that stays water-soluble throughout the whole process. You want to have a process that ultimately breaks down and restores the lipophilicity of if that's a real word, of the cannabinoid. You know, I'm a psychiatrist, so we're used to making up words and then telling everyone else that makes them crazy. So anyway, so if you look at this though, you want to have something that absorbs better, so it's hydrophilic, which is water attracted. But once it absorbs, it becomes lipophilic because you want it to attach to the fat if you want to get a longer term result with it, which you really do want from this kind of medicine. Because after using it with my patients and myself for the last 3 years, I would say this is a substance that is available in many different forms. And some of them are better for some situations and some of them are better for others. But it's a slow medicine. It's not a fast medicine, with the possible exception of THC. So for CBD should be seen as a slow medicine, not something to just take and I feel better the next day, although some people do. For most people, it takes a while for it to work in all of those systems I was mentioning before in the body, and it doesn't work very well at all on cannabinoid receptors. So what it does on the cannabinoid system, endocannabinoid system, is it boosts anandamide levels, and anandamide is one of the two neurotransmitter / signaling agents of the cannabinoids. And so it works on that. It works by enhancing that to stay around more by partially, and that's a very important part of all this, partially blocking one of the enzymes that breaks it down. And so it made it more available.
So I know some people, they get fatigued when they first start out. So in your book, you talk about slow titration and kind of moving up. So one, what are kind of the side effects, and how do you start people? How do you start dosing them?
So I usually look for like a 20-to-1 or above tincture. I'd settle for 15-to-1 or above, but we are fortunate out here in California and in this area. I have another person who's another member of our research consortium who is a master grower of CBD plants. He's got at least 6 strains that he's currently growing that are above 22-to-1. And these are remarkable plants. They're incredible. Their profiles are also very different. They're total cannabinoid profiles. Beyond CBD, beyond THC, there are at least 7 other cannabinoids that are medically active. And so if you start mixing and matching these strains, you can really get a very broad total cannabinoid profile. So I have the good fortune of being able to use that dispensary with my patients, and he always has a consistent supply. He's a tiny little dispensary, but he has more CBD plants than anybody in the world. I mean, really, he's probably, I'd say strains, he's growing at least 12 strains that have a high level of CBD. Some of them have more THC and some of them less, but 6 of them are above 22-to-1. Then he's a few that are 3-to-1, 2-to-1, 1-to-1. So those are nice kinds of things to be able to send patients to, because we can kind of direct them what they want to get. And unlike a lot of dispensaries, their supply is consistent, which is nice. So they can get the same thing month to month.
So you typically start somebody on a 20-to-1 ratio,
Yeah,
or
20.
do you?
Yeah, I do. And I start them on 5 drops of a tincture. It can be an alcohol or oil.
Okay.
And if there's water available, that's fine too. But mostly they're alcohol or oil tinctures that are out there. And they start with 5 drops. If they're doing an alcohol tincture, it's in a really high proof alcohol. So we want them to dilute it with water in like a shot glass or a small glass, and then down the hatch. If it's oil, they can just put it in their mouth. There are a lot of myths about CBD because they come from what happens with THC, but they're not necessarily applicable to CBD. So one of them is put the CBD under your tongue because it absorbs better. The one study that ever looked at absorption of CBD showed that it's the worst place to absorb it, under your tongue, because the molecule does not absorb well under the tongue, and that you're better off just swallowing it. And then it's also very different to look at how you use it. If it's vaporized or smoked, it's going to be a very different compound than if you take it in a tincture orally, which is going to be very different if you take it in a capsule or something else in the raw plant. So there are a lot of different ways that you can use this, and they all have different kind of effects in how they're absorbed and how they're eliminated and how long they're available.
Okay, so where's the place for THC? So when do you just use the cannabis plant in this 20-to-1 ratio and above? And when do you just start them on a higher THC level?
So what we usually do is start with the CBD level. The way I said, we'll start with 5 drops. I tell them do that in the afternoon, and then every day increase by 5 drops. And when you're not driving and you're not doing anything is when you should start this, and see how it affects you. See if it causes any psychotropic effects. As you said, we get some people that have psychotropic effects even on these very low THC plants. And I suspect it's because of other parts of the plant, some of the terpenoids or some of the phenols that are in the plant or something else is interacting in some way with the cannabinoid profile that's there. And people get dizzy, or they feel like I've had some people that actually felt stoned on it, which I felt was unusual. So I want to start them at a low tincture and then bring it up quickly by 5 drops until they reach 30 drops. If they're fine with that, then I want them to do the same process in the morning until they're on 30-30. And that's a pretty good dose of CBD to me. It's about the plants and the tinctures we're using, they're getting, at that dose, they're getting about 34 milligrams of CBD a day that day. And that's a nice way to kind of start off with all this stuff. Then once they reach 30-30, and especially if sleep's an issue, and sometimes right off the bat if sleep's an issue, we'll have them start on that where we'll give them a high THC tincture. It'd be like a 1-20, or if they're people that tend to have had a bad response to that in the past or anything like that, we'll give them a 1-4. I'm sorry, a 4-1 CBD to THC thing. But I like to put them for sleep on a 1-20. We have a very unique strain out here that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world because it's grown by the first fellow I told you about in our consortium. Mm-hmm. And it's called Black Beauty. And it's a plant with the green leaves and a black flower. And it's really, you can see some purple in it, but it's really black. I mean, it's a black flower. And it has a high level of THCV in it, which is an amazingly medical cannabinoid. It's a remarkably medical cannabinoid. And so that's unique. And so sometimes it's very helpful for sleep, and it's a good anti-pain thing too. And it's got a low dose of THC in it and no CBD. Interestingly, that plant, it started off as a pure CBD plant, and it doesn't make any CBD anymore. Oh, wow. And as they bred it, it started making this THCV at a very high percentage, 3.5%. That is huge, because if you're a person who's smoked pot all your life, you might have had a tiny amount of THCV you've ever had, and probably not. If you can get it in a plant that's bred for it, you might find 0.1 to 0.5%. This is 3.5%, and it's analgesic, anti-inflammatory, anti-epileptic. It's neuroprotective. It is anti-diabetic, anti-cholesterol, and wow. and there's several, there are a few others I'm forgetting, but it's an amazingly therapeutic plant. And I've worked on this with patients with those conditions, and it's been phenomenal, and it helps a lot with sleep. So sometimes I'll have them use that for sleep. That was a very long explanation that I told you I could ramble. And so we sometimes have them use that instead of a high THC plant. So those are the kind of, I get to know the patient on the CBD stuff early, and then using the substance, and then I get a better idea of what I want to give them at night. Then we start mixing everything. We start having them vaporized to touch their pain up. We have them use the tinctures to keep it there for a long time. We have them make and use capsules. We have them use suppositories if they've got a problem with getting stoned, but they're getting a benefit from the plant. The suppositories don't tend to get people stoned, even with very high THC levels. We've used. But my very favorite treatment is the one that I really used on myself starting in December of this last year. I broke my leg in 3 places and tore the ligament between the tibia and the fibula. And they had to screw my fibula into my tibia with a plate and several screws, and then they had to screw in on the other side a fragment of the bone that had come apart from my bone. And it was very painful and unpleasant, and they had to do that so that the ligaments would heal, because I couldn't coordinate my leg. So if I tried to move it that much, it would go pop, or it'd go like that, and it was crazy. I used Dilaudid after the first surgery for a couple of days, and it didn't really help all that much. I do pretty well with that as a pain medicine, but it didn't really help all that much. And then I started vaporizing CBD stuff, and that helped a little, but the THC vaporizing really took the neuropathic pain, and knocked it out. It was amazing. So as a neuropathic pain agent, nothing tops THC, including any of the medicines we use. Once the bandage came off, I came up with a very cool treatment, and I would like to show it to you.
Yes, please do. Is that topical? I'm thinking it's topical now that you're saying that.
You are very correct, but it is uniquely topical. So in part of this neuroplasticity stuff, I invented a cream that's a wonderful pain cream that has GABA in it, and not gabapentin, real GABA. Has anti-interleukin 1, interleukin 10, fibroblast growth factor, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. We had to get these things from Italy to get these substances. And we've used that cream effectively with our patients for the last decade. And it's a great pain cream. And initially we were putting the cannabinoids into that when I started using it topically. And they seemed helpful. It made the cream, I think, a little bit better. It wasn't a whole lot better. And then I figured out this because of my broken ankle. So this is a roller? Yeah, and you just roll it on the pain. In Canada, I thought it was brilliant. I went to a conference in Canada, and these things were all over the place in Canada. I thought I'd really invented something amazing. But they were in oil, and the problem with oil is it doesn't absorb as well as the alcohol. This is in the alcohol tincture, and you just roll it on your area. It evaporates in 15 seconds, and it works within 3 minutes. And for my ankle, it gave me total and complete all-day pain control. So I started using this with our patients, and I started having them rolling on everything that they got. And it's been a fantastic treatment. I mean, I would say for half of the patients we have, this is their number 1 pain treatment, is what they do. And it's only been out since December.
Is there different receptors in the skin? Because in your book, you do talk that you have cannabinoid receptors in your skin versus the brain and the immune system.
Yeah, no, they're the same.
How different are they in the skin?
Huh?
Are they different?
No, they're the same. There are only 2 identified receptors: the GR55, the G-coupled transmembrane 55 receptor is slowly being considered a 3rd cannabinoid receptor. I think that's true, and I think the TRPV receptors are also cannabinoid receptors. So, but the only 2 confirmed ones are the CB1 and the CB2 receptor, cannabinoid 1, cannabinoid 2. And those are in your skin, those are in your brain. There are more CB1 receptors in your brain and more CB2 receptors in the peripheral body, but there's plenty of both in both. So the myth that the CB1s are just in the brain and the others are in your body, it's not true. They're really plenty of both in both areas. The bigger deal is this: because the endocannabinoid system is so responsible for controlling so many basic systems in the body, that what happens when you roll this on is it goes into that new organ they discovered in our body 3 months ago. You know about that new organ?
Well, the system, right? You're talking about the endocannabinoid system, not the organ.
This
Or
is a new organ. This is a new
oh,
organ.
enlighten me.
And it very much affects what you've been through, by the way. It's
Hmm.
the it's the extracellular matrix and the interstitial fluid. This exists throughout our bodies. We float in 15 liters of interstitial fluid. The extracellular matrix is the microscopic connective tissue throughout our bodies, and it's made of, fibrils of collagen and elastin, and it floats in hyaluronic acid and glucosamine and chondroitin, and all the blood vessels, capillaries run through that system, and all the little nervelets run through the system along with it. And so when you get injured, you dump fluid into that system at a slight change in the interstitial fluid pressure causes you to dump 10 times the fluid you normally do. So you get swelling and edema and all that other stuff. Well, that's all inflammatory. And that's that system that that you talk about in the lecture that you did, where all of this stuff gets played out. And so the endocannabinoid system modifies that system. That's one of its big jobs. And so when you roll this stuff on the skin, you modify the fibroblasts, which are the main cells in our body. They're the most common cell in our body, and they're what populates that system. They go from being torpedo shaped and producing all kinds of inflammatory products and being misaligned to lining up in parallel to each other, turning back into a more spherical shape. And they stop producing inflammatory products, and they start producing anti-inflammatory products. That then affects all the fibroblasts in all the layers between your skin and your bone. And this extracellular matrix exists everywhere. It's all over your body. That's why they couldn't figure out it was an organ until some smart guys who published an article in Nature looked at it and said, the cells all function the same everywhere. This is all over your body. It's in all the organs. It makes up every part of our body. It's an organ. And so they declared it an organ about 3 months ago.
Wow. No, that's new information. That's new information for me. So that brings up the question, even with cannabis and this new organ system, we have a variety of physicians out there in the market space that know nothing about the endocannabinoid system.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. So what's the best way to educate healthcare professionals and then the general public? What's the best way?
You know the answer to this. They should read my book. They should get the book and read it. No, honestly, I really, part of the reason I wrote the book was because when I went to see what dispensaries were like, and I walked in there and tried just to start my own kind of sense of what happened with all this stuff, it was baffling. I could not determine what the heck I was supposed to do when I got in there. There was a million different products. There were a million different products. They went from buds to chocolate bars to everything else in the world. And the bud tenders really knew THC. They didn't know anything else. And they would learn a little bit as people would come in and say, I did this and this helped. And they would tell you that, but that's not science. That's anecdotal stuff. And so I thought, well, I'm going to send all of these, 60 and 70 and 80-year-old people who have no experience with cannabis into these dispensaries, and they're going to have to figure out what to do for themselves. That's crazy. And then I started thinking about it and thought, and doctors don't know anything about this either. And I kind of studied that and looked at it, and I was right. Doctors know nothing about the endocannabinoid system. They know nothing about the phytocannabinoid system at all. They certainly know nothing about the endocannabinoid system. And it's a really important system. It is the most important system for controlling disease in our body. And it's just not been out there long enough for people to know enough about it. So what I found was that doctors were very amenable here in California to giving people certifications for their problems and had an understanding of what cannabis could do for different problems that our medicines weren't really touching. But that's where their knowledge stopped. And they just didn't know how to help them through it. And so they got turned over to the 18-year-old, 20-year-old, 30-year-old bud tenders whose expertise was basically in smoking pot. And so they got a lot of information that got them too stoned or made them feel poorly. And doctors still have no idea how to do this. So part of why I wrote the book was so that patients would know how to deal with all this. Doctors would get a sense of there was real research behind this, and there were real systems in the body this was working on. You mentioned in your podcast that one of your favorite things from Meshulam, which, by the way, I think is the way he pronounces his name, because I heard that from someone. I just found that out too. That he said that you know, this system exists in our body not to accommodate a plant. It exists in our body because of something that's important and that we need it. And it's right. So that information getting to physicians, I think, is gonna take a bit more. I wrote the book so they would certainly have something where they didn't have to do all the research I did to find the stuff out about it, and for non-physicians as well, and for, you know, nursing, and for other health professionals. I wanted them to really look at this, because this is a treatment that, although doctors certify people for it, they're not expert in this. And I actually think nurses and psychologists and physical therapists and other health professionals might be a better group to target in all this, to kind of really do the treatment, which is much more important than just giving a certification.
No, I agree with you. There's a lot of states out there that can currently only actually get access to CBD. And
Right.
My presentation that I gave was strictly to physicians, because they had no idea. And a lot of them are like, that's the most information I've actually heard about CBD. And that was greatly due to your book, the information that I gave them. But I'm finding that they're wanting to know more information, and they don't know how to actually access it. They don't even know the people, the experts in the field, the people to go to, even the conferences that they're going to. Some of the conferences, I've had a couple physicians say to me that the conferences that they went to they haven't been able to talk about it because there was no information, or they were kind of against it. And I think a lot of them are against it because they don't know anything about it. And once they learn about it, they go, oh, I didn't realize that's what it did.
Well, there's that. And by the way, I you know, as with that other conference where you and I were at the conference, you were in the audience, I was giving one talk of many. I thought the quality of the talks were horrible. I mean, it was like, you know, people going up there and talking about their anecdotal experience and hawking their product if they were making one, or this kind of stuff. It was really, it was a remarkably awful quality for any kind of medical conference. It was just, you know, there was a lot of storytelling, very little science. And so, you know, I mean, I think it's hard for doctors to go to the existing conference and get a lot out of them. And the ones that do have a lot of science have no practical clinical information attached. So one of the things I did was I've created a series of about, I think I have 6 done, but I'm going to do about 12 little videos that I'm eventually going to put up on the web that will help people kind of went through everything. And I started with the big picture, and I looked at, I grabbed the paper, I've got it up there. Medical use overview, recreational versus medical, the endocannabinoid system, the phytocannabinoid system, strains, embodiments, delivery systems, total cannabinoid profile, blends, the law, do-it-yourself, the future of medical cannabis, and condition-specific treatment. So those are the videos I've made about 5 or 6 of them, but I got a few more to go. I will start doing that, and then I'm going to post all that up on the web.
Oh, I will look forward to watching those myself and learning from you.
As they develop, I will send you copies of those and links and all that.
Yeah. Kena, you've talked a little bit about growing cannabis, and that you have this dispensary that you go to. Is there a difference between if it's outdoor grown versus if it's indoor grown?
Yes. So the indoor grown plants are much prettier because there are no bugs and there's no infestations usually. I mean, you can get them, but they can control for a lot of that stuff much better than outdoors. But the outdoor plants are much bigger. The flowers are bigger, the plants are bigger, there's more of a yield with them. And so probably the best combination is to start something indoors, and when it flowers, move it to outdoors.
Okay. And in regards to the strands, because I kind of want to talk about that, there's 3 different strands of the cannabis plant that we know of. Most comes from the sativa. There's the rudialis, I believe, and the indica.
Right.
Now, are you specific when you're telling somebody? Are you saying, go get this cannabis sativa plant? Are you specific in what product?
Sometimes, and most of the time I'm specific at what product, but yes, sometimes I'm specific about sativa or indica. So, you know, the only thing I really find important about the distinction of those two, and ruderalis, nobody has any of those. I mean, those are short little stumpy plants that grow in Russia and in Eastern Europe, but they they don't really, and Central Europe, but they don't grow naturally. You have to kind of take them out of those areas to grow them. And because they're short, most people don't grow them as their own plant because they don't yield that much, but they'll cross them with indicas and they'll cross them with sativas because they're really hardy. So, and they're very high in CBD also, the ruderalis plants are. So but if it even gets more confusing because the whole genus is Cannabis sativa. And then in that genus, the species are Cannabis sativa, Cannabis indica, and Cannabis ruderalis. And it's that way because in the beginning there was only Cannabis sativa, and then they kind of came up with these other things. And some people argue that ruderalis really isn't separate from the sativas. It's a sativa, but it really looks different and it really acts different. So I don't buy that. But there's a little controversy about that too.
I believe we're in luck. So I think we do still have a recording of it.
If you need me to do it again, I'll do it again. Don't worry. And I really feel strongly that medical cannabis is an anti-aging substance.
No, tell me more about that. Tell me why you think it's anti-aging.
So I made this chart. I'll show you this chart.
Yeah.
I know it's not showing up. I made this chart, and it's got all the cannabinoids across the top, and it's got the different symptoms on the side of what we know, what we've seen documented of what it treats.
Okay.
And so, but it basically looks at THC, THCV, CBD, THCA, CBDA, CBDV, CBN, CBC, and CBG. And it looks at all the things that they do. And together they cover about 30 symptoms and conditions from what's documented in the literature. I didn't put anything on here that was apocryphal or anything on here that was just somebody's anecdote. I really looked at the literature for all this stuff. And it goes from analgesia and anti-inflammation to cancer treatment and anti-diabetic, anti-cholesterol, antifungal, anti-glycemic. It's like, wow. And the different cannabinoids have different ways of doing this. And even when they overlap, they don't do it the same way. They all do something a little subtly different, which is why this is a synergistic plant. It's very open to being modified by the other cannabinoids. And so, but if you look at CBD covers 20 of the 30 symptoms that cannabis is shown to be helpful for. And it's just a completely remarkable substance. 8 of the cannabinoids, 8? Yeah, 8 of them are anti-inflammatory. Inflammation is the cause of aging, period. You know, we're born and we go from a lot of anabolism to a lot of catabolism as we age, and we just start breaking down, and inflammation is the process that makes that happen. And it causes everything from, you know, autoimmune conditions like you've had to cancer, and, you know, the other reason I was very interested in this, by the way, is it looked for sure like I had prostate cancer. I had an MRI that said, a prostate-specific MRI that said 90% chance it's prostate cancer. And then I had a PSA that just went steadily up and got to 13.5. It looked pretty sure I had it. I don't have it. I used CBD for 2.5 years before I let them biopsy me. And I used the other cannabinoids too, but CBD was my main thing I was putting in my body day and night. And I went back in, I had no prostate cancer. Next day.
Did your PSA level go down?
It didn't. So it did initially. It went from a 9.5 to an 8.5, and then next year it went up to 13.5, and I was sure I had it. And so I said, okay, I'll do the biopsy now. And that was like 2.5 years into the treatment. And they did it at 15 cores, all negative. The next day I broke my leg, so I got to use it on my pain after that because I had no opportunity to use it on my pain because I already had that under control with the neuroplastic stuff I did. So this gave me a lot of pain to work with, and it is an incredibly remarkable pain treatment. And that involves all of it, CBD, THC, the whole works. It's amazing. As an anti-aging thing, though, because there's so many of these that are anti-inflammatory, I'm utterly convinced that it really helps. My personal experiences feel the best I've ever felt in my life. I'm 69 years old. I wish I felt this way when I was 30. I wish I felt this way when I was 20.
Yeah.
I'm alert. I'm creative. My memory's good. Everything's good with all this stuff. And I've got 400 patients that are about the same. I mean, they're really doing well on this stuff.
I'm in the state of Utah. Everybody thinks it's a gateway drug and it can cause addiction. What are you telling people when they're asking that question?
If you're using it without getting high, I promise you that's not a gateway to anything other than not being high. If you're using it to get high, it's still not a gateway to anything else. And the NIH even supports that. And the CDC, in the guidelines they put out about opioid prescribing, did something I've never seen them do in a set of guidelines before. First of all, the guidelines are crazy. They're too low, and they're too arbitrary. But second of all, they did this thing in the guidelines where they told people in the guidelines when they were talking about these low levels and all this other stuff to remove testing for THC for urine testing. Right? You ever see anybody ever do that? We do it. The CDC told them to do it and went further and said, medical cannabis is not a gateway drug. In the guidelines, it says this. And it says,
Wow.
it may be helpful in treating pain. Do not kick patients out of your practice who are using this. That could be seen as patient abandonment. I was flabbergasted when I saw that. And I think it's part of the reason that the government has a patent on the cannabinoids. I think they damn well know that these are things that they're going to want to use therapeutically down the line, and that they're not the horrible, nasty Schedule I reefer madness drugs that everybody thought they were, and they're not. And even stuff that's just THC, it's got a lot of medical benefit, a lot.
Okay,
so
my family's in construction, and my brother's concerned because he's always constantly testing for marijuana. In the past, he's always constantly tested for marijuana, and he's had to let go employees because they've tested positive. So what's your thought process on? Well, he chose to, right? He chose to. He has 400 employees.
Good business.
It's a good construction business. But so what's your take on that? Because when you do the drug testing, we don't really have good guidelines with drugs because it shows positive for 30 days. We don't have anything that you're high or you took it 2 weeks ago or 3 days ago. What's your take on that?
Well, it's a real issue. It's an issue around how they're going to figure out how to test people when they drive and they pulled over for a DUI with cannabis. What does that really mean? And you could pull me over and I'd have round the clock levels of THC, but they don't make me high because I'm using them wisely at night, and they're not really having any psychotropic effect by the time I'm behind a wheel again. But I would test positive for it. And even just the roll-on stuff, you'll test positive for THC if you use it. I've had some patients that have tested positive just using that. By the way, that's another way I start people off, is just start them on the roll-on. If their pain's more localized, I'll start them just with that before I go to anything else. But it's a problem where job testing is concerned. The way the law is here in California is even though it's legal in the state and much more than it is in Utah, any employee can fire anyone for showing positive in the urine. There's no protection for it. And I just had a patient who went to go get a part-time job at the Ritz-Carlton, and she told them, I'm using medical cannabis and it really helps me, and I'm not going to stop it to get this job. And they said, just have your doctor write a note that you're using that and it's appropriate and you're under his care. And they took that. So some employers are starting to take the medical certification seriously and look at it and say, okay, if your doctor says it's okay, then we don't care if it's in your urine. Your brother's situation, he doesn't have to fire the people, but he could do something like that. For instance, he could say, if you're certified by your physician, it's okay. Now, will people abuse that privilege? Yes, they will. People will just get a medical certification to get high. And just because they have a medical certification, it doesn't mean that they're not just using the stuff to get high. But again, the theory behind all this is that people using Schedule I drugs, and those showing up in their urine, that they're going to steal, rob, and cheat your company, and that's why you don't want them as employees. But that's just, it's like here in California. You want to hear the craziest part of the law that's here?
Yeah,
you can't open a cannabis dispensary within 1,000 feet of a school. That makes some sense, right? Mm-hmm. And you can't open up 1,000 feet of a bar. What? A bar. And the federal law says, and all the states have to do this, that you can't have a gun license if you have a medical cannabis license. And I mean, they're the mellowest, most peaceful people in the world. I have no idea why they would say that, but that's how they set these things up. And it's kind of, they're just crazy aspects of all this like that. And I guess the bar thing must have been, some kind of, bars were trying to protect their business, but I don't think that's really an issue.
So what would you like to see done with legislation? From a national level, from a state level, how do you feel like it should be regulated?
Thank you for asking me that question because it's really important. So look, there was talk of making CBD into a Schedule II drug. That's where opioids are. That's where cocaine is. If you want to prescribe cocaine, because we can prescribe that. That's where amphetamines are. And I mean, it's like, holy mackerel, why would you make CBD in that? And my view of it is, it should be deregulated. It shouldn't, and cannabis in general should be deregulated. It should not be scheduled at all. And it's not a drug. It's a plant, and it's got lots of different substances in them that have potential to be quite helpful and quite helpful for people. And as I said, I really do believe this is an anti-aging substance, and the evidence is there that it is. It just studies need to be done, and those are going to take a while to get out because we have to wait till people age, right? Mm-hmm. And so, but it's an amazing kind of conflictual, weird thing that's out there that says it's not legal federally, so you're not really allowed to fly on a plane with it, even in your own state, because you have to go through the federal TSA screening program. And this week, I heard 2 people got their tinctures taken away from them. You can't fly with it. You can't cross state lines with it. You can't. And these are my patients. This is their medicine now. This is what they're using. By the way, that study I did, 72.3% of the patients on opioids lowered their opioids on this, and I didn't ask them to do it.
I saw that in your book. I thought it was so interesting.
I've been doing this a long time. I've been a pain specialist for over 30 years, and I have to tell you, that is the first time I've ever seen anything even close to that. We helped people get down on their meds using these neuroplastic approaches, but it was a struggle, and it was like maybe 10%, 15% of people were able to really lower their opioids with that. This was spontaneous, and they would come in and they would say, oh yeah, I'm only taking 3 Vicodin instead of 6, and I'm only doing, I was taking 180 milligrams of morphine, now I'm taking 30. And it's like, who told you to do that? And they said, I just didn't need it. And that's what I saw with this, which is, again, is remarkable. So like you said, opposite of being a gateway drug, this thing has a potential to really help with the opioid problem that's out there now, and with other drugs, not just opioids. I've had people lower their benzodiazepines, their anticonvulsants, their antidepressants, all of it on this stuff. So to look at it and say the laws should be different in each state is insane, because you're just ending up not allowing people, even when they travel, to use their own medical treatment by having this kind of rule. To make it into a scheduled drug, even the THC, I think is crazy. It should be in the supplement category, and it should be regulated that way, as a supplement, not as a drug, because it's not a drug. Now, you could refine a drug from there. You could do isolates and get the drugs out, but there are problems with the isolates. They don't work the same as when you combine isolates, which I think is an amazing idea, or when you combine isolates with a botanical mixture, so that you get more of the total plant kind of activity. The isolates can be great in and of themselves as doing things like you could have a high THC tincture, and you could add a CBD isolate to that and turn it into a 1-to-1 CBD to THC tincture. You could, and with really good concentrations of both. You can supplement. You could have a low CBD tincture, and you could drop the isolate into that, and boom, now you've got a high CBD tincture. So there are lots of great uses for the isolates, and they can be used alone. They can be used. You can add them to if you're vaporizing something, you can add an isolate to the vaporizer and boost the CBD quality of what you're getting in the vaporizer, or any other isolate that you're using. So the isolates have great applicability, and it's just I think the problem with them is they work in a narrow bell-shaped curve. At least the CBD ones do. If you use it in an isolate, and if you use it in a biologic mixture, it's much more of a linear curve, and the more you use, the better you'll get. With the isolates, you have to find that sweet spot with them and stay in that sweet spot, or else you're not going to get as much benefit if you take too much or too little. So it's just harder to do. Doesn't mean they're not useful. they're great in some ways, like, for instance, pressing them into pills. Doctors understand pills. Doctors don't understand isolate, and they don't understand smoking something or vaporizing it, but they do understand pills. And so one way to get doctors to use this more is to put it in the forms that doctors are comfortable with. And that's probably going to be more the way it gets disseminated out there than by somebody like me writing a book.
Well, do you think that it does you need to go to have a medical card and actually go to a physician? Because you're saying, I think it should be unregulated, is what I heard you say, but as a nutritional supplement. But I look at the nutritional industry, and there is a lot of there's medical grade nutritional supplements, and then there's quite a few supplements that just have very few, they put a small amount of CoQ10. And, right. So I don't even think the nutritional companies, the regulation on the labeling is that great.
No, it's not, but it's certainly better than nothing. And so California is a good example for this stuff. So California had a medical law for 20 years, and then they developed a recreational law. And all of the medical places got recreational licenses because there's more money in that for them. Yeah. They got, right?
Yeah.
And they were pretty much selling to recreational people anyway, a lot of the stuff that they were doing. There were honest people going in there, a lot of them for medical, but there were a lot going in just to get stoned, right? And be legal. And I like that. I'm glad they were. What in the world are we putting people in jail over this thing for? That is insane. That there are people now languishing in a jail for something that I use medically and we're talking about on a podcast. I mean, that's just completely nuts to me. And so I look at the law, and to me, we have to have a uniform federal law. I actually think because Canada legalized federally, we will in the next year or two, because no way we're seeding them in this business. That'd be crazy. The Republican side of all this is coming around. They recognize that this is a good business. They certainly support the hemp business. And the Democrats have always been supportive of it. So I think this is going to be a real thing. And I think it's going to be who maneuvers to be the political hero that legalizes this stuff. I hope they don't make it into a scheduled drug, because then it's going to depend on doctors prescribing it, and we don't know how to prescribe it. I mean, I do, not many people do. So it's quite problematic. And that's the real issue. Can we interrupt 1 second? I just had a FedEx guy walking in.
No, you're good. You're fine.
So I think, the big deal is that we really have to look at making a uniform federal law and work toward then the states having their own individual variations of those laws, but that the federal law at least gets this decriminalized and out of the criminal system completely, because it has no place in there. It's silly. It's like telling you apple pie. You're eating apple pie in Iowa. I'm sorry, you're going to jail. No.
Okay, so what's your thoughts on third-party testing in these laboratories?
Right. So I think testing is really important. I think it helps people know what they're getting. And there's another thing about this substance, which is in most embodiments, not isolate, but in most other embodiments, it morphs, it changes, it becomes other things. That's not necessarily bad, because one of the things I love about cannabinoid medicine is that it's not the same substance day after day. It changes into other things, and your body has a harder time adapting around that kind of stuff. If you keep presenting something that's similar but novel each time a person takes it, you're going to have a lot better chance of the body not making an adaptation. At least that's my thought about all this stuff. And I certainly do not see our patients get tolerant to this stuff. They may get a little bit of tolerance to the THC, but that's about it. And what works the day 1 and day 10 will work on day 80. And month 30, I mean, it'll keep working. And so that's a nice thing about this. And I think it's because the plant does have this natural thing where CBN it turns into CBD and THC, and then THC and CBD over time turn back into CBN. I mean, it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And THC, if you use THCA, which is another of the active cannabinoids, but it doesn't get you stoned, and you use that, within 6 months, most of it will turn to THC in most forms, other than isolate. Isolate really is the stable form. That's a great use of it. If you can add back in terpenes and other kinds of things, and then mix isolates together, that will be the greatest treatment that we have with medical cannabinoids. Once I can determine how much THCV I want to I want someone to get and how much CBD I want them to get and how much THC and THCA and kind of have people sculpt an set of isolates that does that. That will be a phenomenal.
I look forward to that day. So
me too.
Quickly, with different social situations, you kind of have mentioned vape a couple different times. And do you favor specific routes depending on the administration versus others, depending on different social situations? Because your other thing that you have out there is with vape and smoking, a lot of physicians think that's really horrible for your lungs to inhale anything. And
right.
And the onset of each one of them, orally, suppositories, inhalation, is different. So does social situation kind of come into play?
Totally. So look, you wouldn't want to vape on a plane, but you could take some tincture on a plane, or you could swallow a capsule on a plane, or you could take those before you got on the plane to do that, and they would last through most of the plane ride to most places. But beyond the obvious like that, I mean, I'm sitting in an office during the day. For me, I might want to eat a CBD almond, chocolate covered almond during the day because it's convenient, it's easy to use, and I can just chew it up and nobody's the wiser for what I'm doing. And that CBD doesn't get me high in any way, shape, or form. I would like to add some boost during the day. So sometimes that's the right thing for a person to do. Or they can make capsules out of this stuff or get capsules made out of this stuff and use that. And that's a much more acceptable form for, a public situation. You certainly do not want to vape or smoke in public because that's intruding upon other people beside yourself. And it's not a thing to do. And that's really more for the privacy of your own situation. But there are other reasons to do this. When you vape something, you get a peak blood level in 3 minutes. It is eliminated from your bloodstream within 15 minutes, and it's in your tissue at very high levels, and the blood level is very high too until it's eliminated. It's in your tissue for about 2 to 3 hours. And so you're going to get a therapeutic effect from that for about 2 to 3 hours. It'll still be in your system at a lower level, but it just won't exert any therapeutic effect after that time. If you took a tincture orally and swallowed it, if this blood level you got, I'll just throw a number on it, was like 120 when you vaped it, it'd only be 5 in the bloodstream about an hour and a half after you swallowed it. It'll reach 5. But the tissue levels from the oral preparation are 4 to 8 times higher than the blood level, and they'll last 8 hours. So the oral use of this is really great for long-term treatment, and the vaped or smoked use is good for short-term treatment. Now, I want to say something about lung health. Yes, you're right. It is what physicians believe. It is wrong. So the guy who wrote a study that the National Institute of Drug Abuse jumped all over and published everywhere and put up on their websites, it's a guy named Tashkin, who is a pulmonologist. And he wrote up a report that said, we studied cannabis and it has 3 times the tar of cigarettes. It's likely to have a much higher lung cancer and heart disease rate. People smoke pot. He ignored the fact that people that smoke don't smoke more than 1 or 2 joints in a day usually, and that people smoke cigarettes can smoke 2 packs. But albeit, he said that was the problem. The NIDA people loved this. They published it everywhere. It was put up on the DEA sites. It was everywhere. And they couldn't promote it enough. It was a big thing they were promoting. Oh, it's going to cause lung cancer, blah, 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 blah. He then did a follow-up study that they were going to use. For the greater Los Angeles area, he looked at all lung cancer cases. There were like several thousand of them. And he looked at who were smokers, who were pot smokers, and who were non-smokers. And the highest rate, as expected, was in smokers, and the lowest rate was in pot smokers. And it was statistically significant. And so NIDA kind of shied away from publishing that. They weren't interested in putting that information out. And then he did a case series, not a case series, he did a review article where he looked through all the literature for everything he could find on damage to the lungs or any part of the respiratory system with smoking or vaping. And the only thing he could come up with was that it can cause an irritation of the bronchi, but that's about it. And it just causes a little phlegm production. It doesn't cause increase in cancer rates, in asthma rates, and any cardiopulmonary problem that he could find. And that guy was originally the authority on why you don't want to smoke it. And so now he says no. And there were some studies that showed if you look at small cell cancers of the lung, in culture and you put THC or CBD in there, it just kills them. They activate killer cells in the culture and they just destroy the cancer. So if anything, it's probably helpful for lung cancer to inhale this stuff. We don't know yet, but that looks like a real possibility.
Wow, that's super interesting. For a while, I sold. I was a pharmaceutical rep, and I sold Spiriva, and which is an anticholinergic. So the mucus in my training, mucus production was, the more you created that mucus production, the less elasticity you would actually have in those bronchioles and the alveoli, and then that's COPD, right? You get obstructive pulmonary disease. And I've actually thought, and that was a question when I read your book, because you kind of said, I was like, oh, that's interesting versus what I had always been taught by the pharmaceutical firms, that goes into scar tissue and I have a less elasticity in the lungs.
Right. Right. Well, I'm just telling you, that's what
Yes.
Tashkin found. And there were other people that have researched this for lung health. It's really pretty okay.
I'm going to have to look at that. That's really interesting. That's fascinating news. It's great news in the cannabis space.
Well, so here's the thing, and I got to say this. This is what I've figured out from it. This is a substance that no matter what I've asked of it, it has done it. I don't have medicines like that. I mean, I have people that come in and say, "Oh, the CBD doesn't work," and I'll say, "Really? How long did you use it?" "Oh, I used it for like 3 days, and it didn't do anything." It's like, well, you got to, and that's when I talked to them about slow medicine, and you really got to keep this in your system. But when those people go back and they use it, it's interesting. They'll sometimes come in and say, "I still don't think it works," and they stop it, and then they come back and say, "I went back on it again. My pain got a lot worse when I stopped it." Or my sleep fell apart when I stopped it, or my anxiety went through the roof. I've had people miss it for 1 day and their anxiety just goes high, and they start, and CBD in particular, they start it up again, calm down right away. So this is one of those things where I just think there's so much to be discovered about it, because most of our information is really from pharmacologic animal studies. It's not really on people. And so there's a lot of research that needs to be done on this.
So is there a study that you're kind of wanting to come out next?
Jamie, I have 7 come out with next. But yeah, so one of the things we're looking at is we're this research consortium I formed is looking to work with a group in Canada that have developed a dehydrating process for concentrates. So you could take shatter, concentrated oil, where they really kind of, for vaporizing, those kind of vape oil kind of things, that hashish, anything, the plant, any of it, and it will dehydrate the plant and come out with a powder that you can press into capsules. You can put into capsules, you can press into pills, you can add to other things, and it's not isolate, it's full spectrum powder. And so that's one of the things I want to look at, is if we did this with, say, started with CBD and treated people for 3 months with pills of this, so we know exactly what they're getting, they're stable, and we're testing them along the way to make sure they stay stable. And they're taking these things for 3 months that are just CBD. Then what would happen in 6 months if you made it half THC, half CBD, or if you made half of those people do half THC, half CBD, and half THCV, half CBD? What would happen with all that? And so that's the study I want to do next. I want to really look at this, follow a few patients over a period of time, doing these kinds of things. We're not ready for randomized trials with cannabis yet, honestly. And I think that's putting the cart way before the horse, because every time you see something that says medical cannabis does this or doesn't do that, it's not true. It just means the strain we tested with the patients we tested it on at the time we did it, when it had this kind of cannabinoid profile, had this effect or didn't have this effect. And that's all that means. There is no one medical cannabis. It is an infinite treatment, at least as large as what we do in using pharmaceuticals for medicine. I mean, this has incredible applicability, and I know of no medicine that has this kind of profile, and I know of no plant that was ever grown that was more medical than cannabis.
Well, I look forward to that study and future studies of yours as well. Where do you want your space? What does your future look like besides this study? Where else would you like your future to go?
Well, my future is not that long. I'm 70. I'm almost 70 years old. I'm not planning to die anytime soon. I'm hoping this is going to help me live a lot longer. But I don't have a lot of longevity. So what I'm really interested in is turning what I know over to people like you who are younger than me and are going to have a longer lifespan to do some of this stuff and get as much of this information out to people that are in the medical field as I can, and let them start doing all the magic on top of whatever basic things I can come up with between now and then, and really develop, randomized trials, all the other kinds of things that need to be done, and figure out how to use this thing. My view is that the best way we can use this plant is by blending. And that when you blend, you're not just looking for control of the THC level or the CBD level, you're looking at a broad total cannabinoid profile. And I think the total cannabinoid profile is where it's at with this treatment. You want to get as broad a profile as possible. You want to use as many strains and as many embodiments and as many routes of administration as feasible, in the circumstance that you're in. And then you want to really kind of see what that synergistic benefit is going to be of the whole plant. That doesn't mean you can't use isolates. It just means use them in the context of combination of the whole plant and how the whole plant does things.
Well, thank you for being my mentor. I'll tell you that. I'm going to take you up on that and try to glean as much information as I can from you.
So I'm very serious about it. I'm really happy to do this with you. So when we get done, I'll give you my text number and you can text me and I'll help you walk through anything you want to walk through about this.
Okay. I'm quite passionate about it. Just one, for what it did for me. And for the information out there, I just want to help the public change their view of what this plant is.
Well, and look, I know you did a lot of other treatment to get yourself from where you were to where you are now, but I wasn't kidding. You look like a different person from the pictures you show of that horrible carrial stuff that was just all over you. I mean, it was awful.
No.
And I mean, I gasped when you showed the picture, and I'm used to seeing things like that. And I want to say something about that too, by the way. I think all of these things that happened to you were autoimmune. And I think one of the great things cannabis is it's a wonderful anti-autoimmune substance because it doesn't suppress the immune system, it regulates it. If something's too high, it lowers it. If something's too much off to the side, it brings it back to the middle. If it's too low, it raises it. This is amazing that it does all that stuff. And when they developed pharmacologic cannabinoids, not just the kind of THC imitators or the CBD imitators, but unique pharmacologic cannabinoids, it killed people. They had one on the market called Rimonabant that was for weight loss, and it blocked the breakdown of it blocked the CB1 receptor, and people were using it, and a large number of people became suicidally depressed on it because of that. Then they came out with another one. I don't even know what this one was for, that they tested on 6 people in France, and it was a Portuguese study, and they did it in France. And on the 5th dose, they'd already done animal studies. They saw it was fine with animals. On the 5th dose, 5 of the 6 people developed brain damage. 1 died, and 3 of them had residual brain damage years later.
Okay, so explain that, because I thought that Marinol was a CBD. What is it? It's Marinol is THC.
Yeah, Marinol is a synthetic THC. Those they can do pretty easily. It's synthetic CBDs, synthetic THCs, and there are a few of those. They act similar to THC, but not quite the same. They don't work as well, and they don't do as well, and people don't like taking them all that much. But those don't kill people. But the ones that they developed that were drugs that were meant to, I think the second one was not a weight loss drug. It was they were doing something else. They were enhancing the anandamide in the second one. And anandamide, that's what CBD does, but it does it in a subtle and slow way. And they were blasting it like with most of our medicines. That's what gave people brain damage. I mean, to me, that's unbelievable. We've got this really safe plant that doesn't kill anybody. There's no death from this. And we've got all these drugs, any of them that kill people. And, NSAIDs in the United States kill like 18 to 24,000 people a year, right?
Yeah.
And so we've got a drug that its rate is 0 lethality, and it's an illegal drug, even though it has broad medical benefit. And everybody's saying, oh, there are not enough studies. But there are plenty of studies on this. They make it useful. There are just not enough studies yet to be specific about it. That's where we have to go.
Okay, that was another question I had when I read your book, because we have NSAIDs, we have prednisone, we have cortisone, we have turmeric, and now we have cannabis that is all considered anti-inflammatory. And when I was looking at this, I was like, well, how do we know what one's better and what's stronger anti-inflammatory? Do we have any information on that?
Yes. So they looked at, and again, you got to take this with a grain of salt, because what is cannabis and what were they using? And by the way, the NIH stuff, the stuff that's really been used in official studies, it's the worst cannabis in the world. They don't even know what the other components are in it other than THC. And they'll have it like 3%, 3.5% THC, no THC, or 7% THC. Those would all be considered low doses of THC. And then they have people smoking them, they have them vaporizing them, them doing all kinds of crazy stuff that you can't really regulate. And then they say they come up with conclusions. But what they did show in the real research that was done is that medical cannabis as an overall substance is 10 times more anti-inflammatory than aspirin, 2.5 times more anti-inflammatory than ibuprofen, and a little bit more anti-inflammatory than hydrocortisone. And it doesn't do that anti-inflammatory in the same way any of them do. It does it in a completely different way that doesn't tear up your stomach, doesn't cause bleeding, doesn't cause problems with your liver and your kidneys. I mean, it's a really different way of going about an anti-inflammatory response, and it's very potent. So, I look at it and I've kind of looked at that and then try to interpolate what that would mean for specific strains and specific cannabinoids. And it's very clear to me that CBD is the superior anti-inflammatory to all of them. And THC is the superior analgesic to all of them. And that when you combine these in an overall treatment like we were talking about, you can get even a broader total cannabinoid profile than CBC, which is antidepressant, CBG, which is great for sleep, blah, 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 blah. You can go right down through the list of them. And you can have all of these things in a day's treatment. Then you're really getting the most effective treatment we can do right now. It's still not specific. It's non-specific. I can't tell you this is what you should take, this strain and this mixture is what you should take for a migraine. But I can tell you, if you have migraines and you put a drop of a CBD and alcohol tincture or a THC and alcohol tincture, and you put it up against your masseter muscle from the inside of your mouth, you'll knock out the migraine in a lot of people doing that kind of thing. That's remarkable. Nobody knows that, but it happens. I've got 50 people that I've done that with. Yesterday I did one. This woman's had a headache for 8 years, and she got home and she sent me an email and said, that was the most amazing thing I've ever done. It works perfectly.
Okay, you keep using alcohol, but I thought in your book you talk about CO2 extraction. So want your CO2 extraction to put it into alcohol? Now you got me.
Sometimes, but look, so this is the deal. You can extract the cannabinoids into either a tincture or a concentrate with using CO2, alcohol, or butane, and probably a number of other solvents that they haven't used. Butane's not a good thing to take into your body, so it's the least thing you want to do because there's always some residual of what it can do. The CO2 extraction is excellent. It's fast. It does use some other solvents as well, but it really cleans them out nicely. But it costs about $100,000 to $200,000 for a machine to do all that stuff. So you have to be pretty well funded to do that. Alcohol, any idiot can do in a mason jar with some plant and some good high level of ethanol. So we usually recommend 190 to 200 proof ethanol, which you can get online. You heat the plant to a certain temperature for a certain amount of time to decarboxylate it and get the THCA turned into THC and the CBDA turned into CBD, or you don't. You just do it raw and you get the A's instead of those other things, and those are damn good. And then with the alcohol, the people that do this, they have these industrial level evaporators that are a lot less expensive than CO2 machines, and they suck out all of the alcohol and evaporate it off of the substance, and you're left with a concentrate that's a gooey oil. You can turn the thing upside down and it doesn't flow. You have to heat it to make it flow. And then that can be turned into capsules. It can be put into refined a little further and put into vaporizer cartridges. It can be made into just concentrate that they use. It can be made into shatter. It can be made into a lot of different forms of this that are much more concentrated than just the plant. That's ideal if you're going to go from that kind of thing to then really trying to make it into medically kind of recognizable form. So with that oil, that concentrate, you can dilute it a little bit more with other oil and stick it into a capsule. You can swallow it. You can put it in a vaporizer and vaporize it. So you can get at these things in a lot of ways. So one of the cool things about the isolate, so you talked about the CBD isolate.
Yeah.
I just have another thing in my pocket. So here's one that I got at the show. And you can see it's just a crystallite form of it. And it dissolves in
oh yes, I
oil.
saw that. I saw that.
So what I've done now is I've added it to the THC tincture in the roller bottle. So now I'm rolling on a high concentration of CBD without adding any volume and taking away from the THC, and a high concentration of THC on my ankle or on any place that I would have pain. And it works great. I don't know if it's any better than just the THC, but I like the idea that I'm broadening out my cannabinoid profile with this.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I'm going to start working on oral tincture this week.
Okay, so do you have a brand yourself that you promote?
No, it is not my goal to sell or dispense any of this stuff. I want to help the people that are doing this right to do it better and to keep their direction in the right way and to help them make a lot of money, because those are the people we really want out there doing this stuff. And so the rest of the consortium are all people that are either testing or manufacturing. Oh, I never finished the thing about testing you asked me, by the way. So they're either testing or manufacturing, and I want them to make a good living on all this stuff. I just want to do the research. I'm just really interested in this, and I want to use it with my patients. You know, I want to really figure out how to help them, and I want to use it for me. I want to live forever if I can. That's the thing with it. As far as what did you ask that I wandered off into that with?
Well, I asked you about CO2 and ethanol, because you've been using ethanol. Your roller has ethanol, and you said ethanol when you do the.
It's the most practical and the most useful. The CO2 is more refined, and it's really a more efficient way of doing it. But the alcohol works fine, and it's available to anybody. And so, no, I highly recommend alcohol and using it in a tincture. And then what I recommend is people let it sit out and let the alcohol evaporate off as much as they can and really concentrate it down a little bit. You'll get half of what you had if you blow off half, but it'll be twice as strong.
Okay, so leads to my next question, because I've heard a variety of different companies, and they're like, you get the bottle and it's that green gooey stuff that you were saying, and then you get to another bottle and it's dark yellow amber color, and then it's a lighter amber too. The people that say ours is clear, and this is why ours is clear. And that's all. Is that all marketing? Is there some science behind that?
No. So what happened was, when they started developing these techniques for making concentrates and vape oil and all this other stuff, everybody was into the clear. You got to get it clear. You got to clear out clear out the chlorophyll, clear out the plant material, clear out everything except this colorless concentrate that you have at the end of it, right? And of course, that took out all the terpenes, phenols, and flavonoids, all of which have medical properties themselves, and it separated out a lot of the cannabinoids from each other. And so they created this thing that worked, but it was not nearly as good as when they didn't clear everything out. So it's much better to have a little color in this stuff. Now, when people like the people I'm working with make a concentrate, it's black when it's done. It's pitch black. You could make it clear if you wanted to, but there's just no reason to do that. You want to keep the plant as whole as possible. I think the best way to start is with the bud, and with having the flowers that are dried and ready to consume. You don't have to just smoke them. You can turn them into tincture. You can turn them into oil. You can turn them into cooking products. You can make suppositories with them if you want. You could do anything you want with them. And so, to me, the plant is the least expensive and the best way to do it. And growing it, where there's states that allow you to grow it, is a way of really growing your own medicine and having something that is inexpensive and very effective. So, you know, GW came out with this Epidiolex, and it's been approved now. It hasn't, I don't think it's quite released yet. But at their maximum doses, it's going to cost $36,000 a year to do that. At the same doses, if these are super high doses, like people would be taking 500 or 600 milligrams of CBD a day on this thing, right? And most don't do that. And that's where you get into problems with drug interactions and all the other stuff. These are super high doses. At that same dose, though, if you got it from a current dispensary in California, it would cost you $3,600 a year for that. So a tenth of what they're going to charge for it, because they have to support all this research and other stuff that they're doing. And so I mean, you know, this is something that I think is going to continue to exist as a person procured treatment as opposed to a physician procured treatment. I think this has got legs, and it's not going to ever go away. And I think if the industry works well and doesn't get greedy and really kind of makes a distinction between medical and recreational, and puts medical in a very protected, what do they call it, curated kind of position, that we'll have a medicine that really is a medicine of the people, which it's been all along anyway. But they'll have better ways of being able to use it, and better embodiments, and better strains to do this with. So I think the future of cannabis medicine is it's going to remain an individually procured treatment outside of the doctor just certifying a person, that people are going to figure out what they want to do on their own a lot. And I like that. I think that's much more individual medicine.
Well, I like that too, but I agree with you that I think big pharma and even other businesses are going to try to get their hands in it, because there's money there. And since it's been so taboo since Prohibition, it gives them a little bit of ammo on their side, and because it's been so misinformed.
It's true. I'm working with one company that's a big corporate company in the world for medical, and they're in Florida, Texas, Michigan, Puerto Rico, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, Brazil, Colombia, and Australia right now. I mean, this is a big company. But their goal is really, their head's in the right place, and they're really about medical. They're not about recreational. They don't care about recreational. They feel this is a really important treatment, and they want to be out there setting the trends for all this kind of stuff. And businesses like that are going to have the best chance of really making it in this area. And the moms and pops will have to be supported by the states that they're in. Fortunately, right now, California is supportive of that, but they're going to become harder and harder to really do, because you're right, these corporations are going to figure it out. And where there's money, you know, it's like that old joke. Yeah. How do you hide a $20 bill from a orthopedic surgeon?
Well,
you put it in a textbook. You put it in a textbook. How do you hide a $20 bill from a plastic surgeon? Can't have a $20 bill from a plastic surgeon. And so that the corporations are like the plastic surgeons. They're going to smell that money, and they're going to find it.
I love that joke.
No offense to orthopedists. It was just a joke.
Thank you for your time, and thank you for sharing all of your knowledge in this podcast with everyone. And will we see a next book? Will we see a book number 2?
Yeah, so I actually, just before I got on with you, I called Leonard Lino, who wrote the other book you like, this CBD book. And I wrote the foreword to that book, and I wrote the science section in that book. And Leonard's one of the people that, he has a dispensary. He's got the one that has all the CBD plants in it. And I just called him and said, Leonard, we need to do a book this next year. We need to now take what we put in our first books and what we've learned since then, which I feel like my book's almost out of date compared to what I've learned since published in December. So I want to write another book with him, and I really want to focus on that list I read you to have that kind of be the backbone book, and then he and I'll write it together, and I think that'll be really nice, and we're going to try to put a lot more practical stuff in it as we can.
Well, I look forward to reading that book and continuing our relationship. And thank you for listening to Dr. Am I pronouncing that right? Dr. Moskowitz? Is that your correct pronunciation? Moskowitz. Okay. Well, my apologies. My apologies.
All right. You should hear what people call me. Yours was easy. That was nice. mosquito, maka.
Well, thanks for the correction.
That's all right. But great, and I really enjoy doing this. Honestly, this is how this information is going to get out there. It's by people doing podcasts and people going out and giving talks and people writing books and articles and stuff. This is how it's going to get out there. So I'm very happy to do this. And if you want me to do this in the future for any reason, I'm happy to do it again. Most people who get into medical cannabis in one form or another are expecting to make money. I have figured out a perfect scheme of how to lose money doing this. So I've spent thousands and thousands of dollars researching, looking at things, and buying products, and looking at what they do, and working with people on all this stuff. And I have no regrets. I'm really happy about this. I don't care if I ever make back my money or break even or make money or do any of that stuff. This is the most fascinating thing I've ever done in my medical career, and I want to do this until I'm not here anymore.
Thank you so much for your time. I know how valuable it is.
I know, for you it's good. Pleasure. Anytime.
Okay. All right. Have a great day. Have a great weekend.